Welcome to This is Thailand. Now, most of the men who sit down to tell me a story on this channel, they chase something warm. A woman, a beach, a feeling they remembered from a holiday 20 years ago. That's usually how it starts. A bit of sun, a bit of attention, and suddenly a man who should know better is making very large decisions with very small amounts of information. Brendan's story is a bit different. Brendan is 63 years old. He's from Limerick, in the west of Ireland. He spent 31 years as an IT support technician, and if you know any IT men, and I think most of us do, you'll already have a sense of the kind of person we're talking about. Methodical, precise, not the type to do anything impulsive or foolish. He didn't come here chasing a girl. He didn't come here chasing a beach. Brendan came here chasing a spreadsheet, and I'll leave it at that because the rest of it, well, Brendan can tell you himself. What I will say is this. There are stories on this channel where a man loses everything to someone who lied to him, and those stories are hard to hear. But then there are stories where a man builds the trap himself, with his own hands, with good intentions and careful logic. And those ones stick with you differently. This is one of those. Here's his story in his own words. Right. So, I worked in IT support for Limerick County Council for 31 years. And I want to be clear about what that means, because people hear IT and they picture someone in a glass office writing code. That wasn't me. I was the man you rang when your printer wasn't working. When you'd somehow managed to delete a folder and couldn't find it. When the shared drive had gone down and 14 people were standing around with their arms folded, waiting for someone to fix it so they could get back to doing very little. That was me, for 31 years. I was good at it, actually. Not that anyone particularly noticed. The nature of the job is that when you do it well, nothing happens. And nothing happening doesn't get you a lot of credit. People only noticed me when something went wrong. And then they'd ring with this particular tone of voice, slightly aggrieved, as if the printer had broken specifically to inconvenience them, and I was somehow adjacent to the crime. I didn't hate it. That's the honest answer. I'm aware that's not a rousing endorsement of 3 decades of work. But there it is. I didn't hate it. I was indifferent to it. And I've come to think that's actually worse than hating something, because at least hatred has energy in it. Indifference is just nothing. You show up, you fix the thing, you go home. My wife, Mary, passed in 2015. Cancer. That's not the story. I want to be clear about that. But it's context, so I'm mentioning it once and moving on the way she would have wanted me to. She had no patience for wallowing. Neither do I, in theory. After that, it was just me in the house, in Dooradoyle. 3-bedroom semi, nice enough. The kids had grown and gone, which again, not unusual, that's what kids do now. But Ciarán's in Melbourne, Aweef's in Vancouver, Ronan's in Perth. So not just gone. Gone to the far side of the world, all 3 of them, to different far sides of the world, as if they'd divided up the globe between them. I get texts. I get photos of grandchildren. I've met those grandchildren twice in total, which tells you something, though I'm not entirely sure what. They're lovely children. I could probably pick them out of a lineup. The house was quiet. I'd gotten very efficient at living in it alone. I had a routine. I had systems. Everything had a place. And somewhere around year 3 of that, I started to understand that I'd optimize myself into a kind of, I don't know, a very tidy waiting room. The voluntary redundancy came up when I was 62. The council was restructuring, which is a word organizations use when they want to get rid of people without it sounding personal. They offered a package. I signed it before the HR woman had finished explaining it, which I could tell surprised her slightly. I think she'd expected some negotiation, or at least some processing time. I didn't need processing time. I'd been ready to leave for about 8 years. I just hadn't had a reason to. So now I had a reason, and I had time, and I had a house I rattled around in, and I had, if I'm being precise about it, and I am always precise about it, a state pension of about €1,100 a month, and savings of €65,000 that I built up over the years in the cautious, incremental way of a man who never particularly spent money because he never particularly went anywhere. And the question became, right, Brendan, what now? I wasn't interested in Spain. Too many Irish. Might as well stay in Limerick with better weather. Portugal, everyone was going to. It had that quality of a thing that's been discovered, which means it's already becoming something else. Thailand I'd looked at briefly and set aside. Too hot. Too much talk about beaches, which, I'm sorry, but I've never understood the appeal of sitting on sand. What are you doing on the sand? You're just there. On sand. I don't know exactly when I started looking at Hong Kong. It wasn't a romantic impulse. I'd been on a few of those expat retirement forums, the kind where men post very detailed analyses of their options with spreadsheets in the comments. And I was doing a search one evening for cost of living comparisons across high-density Asian cities. Not a normal search, a very Brendan search. And I found this post. Someone had done a full breakdown. $800 a month, all in, aid living in Hong Kong. Rent, food, transport, everything itemized. MTR fare tables, wet market versus supermarket food costs. A note about avoiding the expat bars. The thing was thorough. It had the structure of someone who'd actually done the work, not just guessed. I read it 3 times. Now, there was a comment underneath, one comment from a user called something like HK_realist or along those lines, that said depends on your lifestyle and your health situation. One comment, I registered it, I noted it the way you note a file permission warning that you're fairly sure isn't relevant to your specific situation, and I moved on. I built my own spreadsheet. I put in my pension figure. I put in the projected costs from the forum. I accounted for the exchange rate. I ran the numbers 3 different ways and they came out workable each time. Not luxurious, comfortable, enough. And I thought, right, Hong Kong, it's a city that works. Everything I'd read said the same thing. Efficient public transport, low crime, world-class healthcare, a place that hummed along like a well-maintained system. I am a man who has spent his entire career making systems work. This seemed, on the evidence available to me, like a reasonable match. I booked a one-way ticket for the 2nd of October. I sent Kieran a text telling him. He replied, "Fair play, Dom." That was it. That was the send-off. Fair play, Dom. I closed up the house. I gave a key to my neighbor Phil, who I've never particularly gotten on with, but who is at least reliable. I packed one suitcase and my laptop bag, and I locked the door of the house in Dordogne for what I thought might be the last time for a good while. I wasn't excited exactly. Excitement is not really my register, but I was interested in what the answer would be, in whether the numbers would hold. That's a very particular kind of hope, I think. The IT man's hope. Not I wish, but let's see if this works. It's a good way to approach a server migration. It's a less good way, as it turns out, to approach the rest of your life. The airport express from Hong Kong International to Kowloon takes 24 minutes. I know this because I'd read it in 3 separate places before I boarded. I timed it anyway. 23 minutes and 50 seconds. I was, for reasons I can't fully explain, pleased about this. That's probably all you need to know about the mental state I arrived in. Chung King Mansions is on Nathan Road in Tsim Sha Tsui, and if you've never been, I'll try to describe it accurately. It's a 17-story building that appears from the outside like any other slightly faded commercial block. Then you walk through the entrance and it's its own thing entirely. The ground floor is a warren of tiny shops selling SIM cards and currency exchange in phone cases and things I couldn't identify. All of it shoulder width, all of it extremely busy, with a smell that layers itself as you go deeper. Cooking oil, something spiced, cleaning fluid, and underneath all of that something older that I couldn't name. The lifts are the size of a wardrobe, and they stop at every floor, and there's always someone already in one when the doors open. The guest house was on the 11th floor, €55 a night. The bed was fine. The bathroom was the size of a reasonable wardrobe. And the window looked at another window approximately 4 feet away, behind which a family appeared to live, though I never saw them move. I loved it. I want to be clear about that because the story has a particular ending, and I don't want you thinking I was miserable from the start. I wasn't. I was, for the first time in probably 3 years, genuinely interested in what was going to happen next. Every morning I'd take the lift down, waiting for it, always waiting for it, and step out into the chaos of the ground floor and then out onto Nathan Road where the trams ran and the signs stacked 40 feet high and the city just went continuously, without pause or apology. I had a system for the first 2 weeks. I'd pick a district each day and cover it methodically. The first week I did the tourist work, the Star Ferry across the harbor, the promenade at Simshatsui, where you get the skyline and everyone is taking photos of the same skyline. The Peak Tram, which cost more than it should, and which I noted in my phone under miscellaneous expenses to avoid. I did the History Museum, which was free on Wednesdays, and which I went to on a Thursday because I hadn't checked, and paid the admission and didn't mind. The second week I got practical. I went to Sham Shui Po specifically because 3 different forum posts had identified it as the most affordable residential district in Hong Kong. Old working-class neighborhood, still mostly local, not yet fully gentrified. I took the MTR, 6 stops from Jordan, clean, air-conditioned, exactly on time, and walked around for 2 hours with my phone out, noting streets, noting the cooked food center on Kwai Lin Street, where a bowl of wonton noodle soup cost about 30 Hong Kong dollars, which is roughly €3.80. I ate one standing up at a high table. It was good. My stomach had no objections, which I noted as a positive data point that would later prove misleading. I found the flat on a Facebook group called something like HK Expat Flat Listings or similar. The post was 3 days old, 280 square feet, subdivided flat, Sham Shui Po, 6,200 Hong Kong dollars a month, rolling 3-month contract, available immediately. I messaged the number. The landlord, a woman named Mrs. Lam, probably mid-50s, efficient in the way of someone who has rented property for a long time and has no interest in conversation beyond what is necessary, met me there that afternoon. The flat was on the 6th floor of a building with no lift, which she mentioned after we'd climbed the stairs. The window faced an air shaft. There was a bed, a small desk, a kitchen unit the width of my arms outstretched, and a bathroom that was functional and no larger. The walls were very white. Someone had put a small shelf above the desk, and this struck me, I don't know why, as a hopeful gesture. I said I'd take it. Mrs. Lam produced the contract. I read it, fully, which seemed to mildly surprise her, signed it, and paid the first month plus deposit. 12,400 Hong Kong dollars, about 1,440 euro. I transferred it from my phone on the spot, which impressed nobody because this is Hong Kong and everyone transfers money from their phone. I moved in the following morning with my suitcase and my laptop bag. And I set up the laptop on the small desk. I connected to the Wi-Fi. I'd organized a SIM card on day 2, data only, 78 Hong Kong dollars a month, because the forum had recommended it, and the forum was right about some things. I opened my spreadsheet. I entered the rent figure in the confirmed column. 6,200 Hong Kong dollars per month, recurring. I sat there for a moment in the white room with the air shaft view and the hopeful shelf, and I thought, right, this is it, so this is where we find out if the numbers hold. And for the first few weeks, they nearly did. I'd do the cooked food center for breakfast most mornings, congee with a cruller, or the wonton soup if I was feeling flush, never more than 40 or 50 Hong Kong dollars. I'd take the MTR wherever I needed to go, and the octopus card deducted the fare automatically, which I approved of. I walked a great deal. Hong Kong is, whatever else you want to say about it, an extraordinary city to walk in. The elevated walkways connecting the towers in Central, the tiled alleys of Sham Shui Po with the fabric shops and the electronic stalls, the unexpected quietness of the temple on Kwai Lin Street, where 3 older men played chess on a stone table every afternoon and never once looked up when I passed. I took the ferry to Lama Island on a Saturday in my 3rd week. There's a village on the far side, Yung Shui Wan, with a seafood restaurant where you can sit outside and watch the fishing boats. I had a beer and some clams and spent 2 hours doing nothing in particular. It cost maybe 500 Hong Kong dollars all in, about 60 euro. I noted it in the miscellaneous column. I didn't regret it. The spreadsheet at the end of week 3, C was looking reasonable. Not perfect, A few lines were running slightly over, but within the margin of what I'd called setup variation. New place, there are always setup costs. Things settle. That's what I told myself. I believed it because at that point I had no particular reason not to. The city was doing exactly what the forum had said it would do. The MTR ran on time. The food was affordable if you knew where to look. The streets were clean and orderly, and the people were polite and busy, and the system, the whole city-sized system, hummed along with the reliability of well-maintained infrastructure. I was the one who hadn't quite settled yet. But I'd settle. That was the plan. That was what the numbers required. November arrived and I did what I always do when something isn't working quite right. I looked more closely at it, and the food was the first line I pulled up. My projected figure was 2,200 Hong Kong dollars a month, about 250 euro. That number had come directly from the forum post, which had specified wet market shopping plus the Dai Pai Dong stalls for cooked meals. Straightforward enough. And for the first 4 weeks I'd managed it, more or less, with some creativity. The problem was my stomach had started having a conversation with me around week 5. Not aggressively, just persistently. The way a user would ring the IT desk, not urgently but repeatedly until you dealt with it. I want to be fair about this. I gave it a genuine effort. There's a stretch of stalls on Kai Lung Street where you can get clay pot rice for about 50 Hong Kong dollars. And it's good, actually very good. But there's a particular combination of preserved meat and fermented black bean that my digestive system was filing as a formal complaint by week 6. I tried the congee consistently. White congee, century egg congee, pork congee, and the congee was fine. The congee I could manage. But a man cannot live on congee alone, or at least this man couldn't, not indefinitely. I started supplementing. A supermarket on Cheung Wan Road sold bread I recognized and cheese, and the kind of yogurt that doesn't challenge you. More expensive than the wet market, obviously. Then there was the occasional sit-down meal somewhere that wasn't a stall, not a Western restaurant. I wasn't spending that kind of money, but a proper Cantonese restaurant with a menu I could point at and a chair with a back on it. Once a week maybe, sometimes twice. Which by the end of November, the food line was sitting at 3,800 Hong Kong dollars, about 440 euros, nearly double the projection. I updated the spreadsheet and looked at it for a moment and told myself it would stabilize. I'd get better at it. I'd find the right balance. Then the insurance letter arrived. I'd known I needed health cover. I'm 63 with a knee that's been giving me trouble since a bad fall off a stepladder in 2019. Nothing dramatic, just a structural complaint that flares when I've been walking a lot, which in Hong Kong I was doing constantly. A GP visit here costs somewhere around 1,500 Hong Kong dollars. A specialist visit more. I wasn't about to sit in this city uninsured. I got 3 quotes. The cheapest reasonable option, basic hospitalization and outpatient cover, 180 Hong Kong dollars excess per visit, came back at 2,100 Hong Kong dollars a month. About 244 euro. I opened my spreadsheet. I looked at the column I'd labeled health and insurance, which I'd estimated at 500 Hong Kong dollars a month based on, and I want to be honest about this, nothing. Based on a vague sense that insurance was cheaper abroad. The forum post hadn't mentioned health insurance at all. The forum post had been written, I was now understanding, by a person who was either very young and healthy, or very lucky, or simply hadn't considered it a relevant line item. I paid the premium, 2,100 Hong Kong dollars recurring. I entered it in the spreadsheet without complaint because there was nobody to complain to, and also because there was no alternative. The miscellaneous column I'd budgeted at 1,500 Hong Kong dollars. By December, it was running at 2,500 Hong Kong dollars. Not extravagance. I wasn't going to the expat bars. I wasn't eating in hotel restaurants. It was the ferry to Lama that one Saturday. The museum admission I'd paid twice by accident because I'd forgotten which ones I'd visited. A pair of walking shoes because my original ones had given out. The hills in this city destroy shoes faster than you'd expect. A haircut, paracetamol, and a knee support from the pharmacy on Pei Ho Street. Small things, reasonable things. They added up with the quiet persistence of a slow network leak you don't notice until the whole system's laboring. At the end of November, I did a proper reconciliation. This is what I do. When a system is behaving unexpectedly, you stop guessing and you read the actual logs. Rent, 6,200 Hong Kong dollars, confirmed as projected. Food, 3,800 Hong Kong dollars, 73% over projection. Transport, 900 Hong Kong dollars. Roughly on target, the MTR is, I'll grant it that, exactly as affordable as advertised. Health insurance, 2,100 Hong Kong dollars. Not in the original budget at all. Phone and data, 450 Hong Kong dollars. Fine. Miscellaneous, 2,500 Hong Kong dollars. 67% over. Total, 15,950 Hong Kong dollars a month. Approximately 1,850 euro. My pension was 1,100 euro. The gap was 750 euro a month coming out of savings. I sat with that figure. I ran the projection the way you do when you already know the answer, but you want the system to confirm it. 65,000 euro divided by 750. 86 months. Just over 7 years. I'd be 70 years old, broke, in a city with no social safety net for foreigners, no public health entitlements, no fallback. I'd have nothing left to sell and nobody nearby to call. I closed the laptop. Not in a dramatic way, just I'd seen the error report and the error was significant and I needed to think about what to do with it. That's all. The thing I want to be clear about for anyone watching this who's planning something similar is that I didn't panic. I'm not a panicker. In 31 years of IT support, I've seen catastrophic system failures. The kind where the entire shared drive has corrupted and 14 senior council officers are standing in the corridor looking at me like I've personally deleted the county. And in those situations, you don't panic because panic doesn't restore backups. You assess the damage. You identify the recovery options. You proceed in order. So I filed the number. 15,950 Hong Kong dollars a month. 1,850 euros. Gap of 750 euros. And I thought, right, I need to find somewhere that the numbers work better. Or I need to find ways to bring the costs down, one or the other. I gave myself until the end of December to work out which. What I didn't put in the spreadsheet, because I didn't know how to quantify it yet, didn't have a column for it, wouldn't have known what unit to measure it in, was the other thing. The thing that wasn't about money at all. But that came later. In December, the problem was still, as far as I was concerned, a budget problem. And budget problems have solutions. You just have to find them. December in Hong Kong is actually pleasant. That's something nobody mentions. The humidity drops, the sky goes a particular shade of blue you don't get in the wet season, and the temperature sits at around 18 or 19 degrees, which is frankly ideal. I'd been too hot in October and November in the flat with the air shaft. The air conditioning unit cost money to run, and I'd been rationing it, which in retrospect explains some of the general irritability of that period. But December was fine. Climatically, December was the best month. I want to mention that because it's relevant. The city was not making things difficult. The city was, if anything, cooperating. I attacked the budget problem methodically. I found a wet market on Nam Chong Street that was marginally cheaper than the one I'd been using and started doing a proper weekly shop. Rice, eggs, some vegetables I could identify and prepare, tinned fish, the kind of provisions that keep and don't challenge anyone's stomach. I made a rule, 1 cooked meal out per day from a stall or a cooked food center, maximum 60 Hong Kong dollars. Everything else self-catered. I tracked it on my phone. By the second week of December, the food line was coming down. Not to 2,200 Hong Kong dollars. That figure was a fantasy, and I'd accepted that, but down toward 3,100 Hong Kong dollars or so. Progress. I also looked at whether there were cheaper flats. There were, but they were worse in ways that mattered. Further out, top floor walk-up in a building that seemed structurally uncertain, shared bathroom. I wasn't prepared to go that far. 6,200 Hong Kong dollars for what I had was actually competitive, and I knew it. The insurance was fixed, non-negotiable. I wasn't reducing that. So I was looking at a best-case revised monthly spend of maybe 14,500 Hong Kong dollars, about 1,680 euro. Gap of 580 euro a month instead of 750. Better, still not sustainable long-term. See, still the same destination, just slightly slower. And then December presented a different kind of problem, which was that I had a lot of time and nowhere particular to be. I'd done the practical research. I'd found and joined 3 expat groups online, a Facebook group for retirees in Hong Kong, a meetup group for English speakers, a hiking group that met on Saturday mornings in the New Territories. I attended the first meetup event, which was drinks at a bar in Wan Chai. I want to describe this accurately without being unkind. The people there were perfectly fine. They were also, almost to a man and woman, in their mid-30s, working in finance or law or corporate consulting, in Hong Kong on expat packages that included housing allowances and annual flights home and private health cover. They were friendly in the distracted way of people who have full diaries and are attending this event because it appeared on their phone at a convenient time. I am 63. I am a retired IT technician from a county council in Limerick. We did not have a great deal to discuss beyond the weather, which I've already noted was pleasant. I went once. I didn't go back. The hiking group I tried twice. The first walk was fine. A route up to the Shing Mun Reservoir in the New Territories. Good path, nice views, people were polite. My knee held. The second walk was a steeper route on Lantau that my knee emphatically did not hold. Ina and I spent the last 40 minutes coming down very slowly, while a group of 20-somethings in technical gear waited at various points below me with the patient expressions of people who are too well-mannered to say anything. I didn't go back to that either. There was a pub quiz in Wan Chai on a Wednesday night. I went alone, which was fine. I've never minded going places alone. I've been doing it for years. I was seated with a table of 4 Australians who were cheerful and included me without any fuss. We came third. They said we should do it again next week. I said yes, definitely. We exchanged no contact details whatsoever. I never saw any of them again. I don't think any of us expected to. The days had a particular texture by mid-December that I was starting to examine with some discomfort. I'd wake at 6:30, and which is when I've always woken, regardless of whether there's anywhere to be. I'd make tea. I'd found a shop on Tung Choi Street that sold Barry's tea, which I'm not embarrassed about. And I'd open the laptop and check the news in the budget spreadsheet and a few of the forums. Then I'd go out. I'd walk somewhere with a plan. This market, that district, this temple I hadn't seen yet. I'd eat at lunchtime. I'd walk back. And then it would be mid-afternoon, and I would have nothing, no task, no system to fix, no user ringing with that particular tone of voice. In Limerick, this gap had been filled by the television, mostly, and by the routine of a house that at least required maintenance. Here, the flat maintained itself. It was 280 square feet. There was nothing to fix. I started going to McDonald's, and not the one near the flat. I'd walk across to the Mong Kok branch sometimes, which is a 15-minute walk, and I'd get a coffee and sit down. Nobody bothers you in McDonald's. The seating is designed for efficiency, not comfort, but that's fine. I'm not looking for comfort. I'm looking for somewhere to be that isn't the flat. It's air-conditioned. The staff ignore you completely, which in the circumstances is exactly right. I'd sit for an hour, sometimes more. I'd read, or I'd look at things on my phone, or I'd just sit. It was on one of these afternoons that I video called AOE for her birthday. She was 41. She lives in Vancouver with her partner and their 2 children, who I know mostly from Christmas photos. The call lasted 11 minutes. She seemed well. She asked how Hong Kong was. I said it was grand. Amana, we talked about her birthday plans, which involved dinner with friends whose names I didn't know. She said it was great I'd made the move. Very brave. I said it wasn't brave really, just practical. There was a pause. She said she had to get the kids ready. I said of course. We said goodbye. I didn't mention the budget figures. There didn't seem to be a way to get there in 11 minutes. And also, I don't know. She had her life. It was a full one, by the sound of it. I wasn't going to ring up at 41 and be a problem. After the call, I sat for a while with the laptop closed. The air shaft outside the window was the usual gray. Someone in a flat across the way had a plant on their windowsill, a small green thing in a red pot. I'd noticed it before. I don't know why I'm mentioning it. The budget problem was improving, technically. I'd shaved the numbers down. December was going to come in at maybe 14,800 Hong Kong dollars. Better than November. But I was starting to understand that I'd been solving for the wrong variable entirely, and that the actual problem didn't have a line in the spreadsheet, and I hadn't the faintest idea how to approach it. January in Hong Kong is when the city puts on its coats, relatively speaking. 12, 13 degrees some mornings. The locals wrap up as if it's genuinely Arctic, which I found faintly amusing. A man from Limerick has a different relationship with 13 degrees. But there was a chill in the flat that the single-bar electric heater struggled with, and I was running it more than I'd planned, which added to the electricity bill, which I hadn't accounted for separately because the Forum Post had bundled it into rent. When the Forum Post had bundled a lot of things into categories that turned out to be optimistic. But I'm not going to talk about the electricity bill. That's not what January was about. January was when I tried, in a fairly systematic way, to solve the problem that didn't have a line in the spreadsheet. I'd identified it clearly enough by then. The budget had stabilized. December came in at 14,800 Hong Kong dollars. January was tracking similarly. And while the gap was still about €550 a month, I'd accepted that as the realistic floor. That wasn't the pressing issue anymore. The pressing issue was that I was spending a lot of time sitting in a McDonald's in Mongkok, and I'd started to understand that this was a symptom of something that needed addressing. I went back to the forums. Not the cost of living forums this time, the social ones. Posts from retirees in Hong Kong, expats who'd settled, people who'd made a life there, rather than just a budget. I read them carefully. The consistent thread was that it takes time. You have to put yourself out. You have to accept that the connections are slower to form here than in places like Southeast Asia, where people are more, I don't know the right word, available maybe, or just less relentlessly busy. That seemed reasonable. So I tried harder. I found a different Facebook group specifically for older expats in Hong Kong and attended a Sunday morning coffee meetup in a place in Sheung Wan. About 8 people, ranging from their mid-50s to mid-70s, mostly British, a couple of Canadians, all retired or semi-retired. It was genuinely much better than the Wan Chai drinks. We talked for nearly 2 hours. A man named Jeffrey, who'd been in Hong Kong for 11 years, told me about a cheap noodle place on Hollywood Road I hadn't found yet. A retired teacher from Edinburgh named Margaret talked at length about a community garden project in Kennedy Town that took volunteers. I wrote down both recommendations. I went to the noodle place. It was good. I went twice more. I didn't go to the community garden. My knee was the reason I told myself. But also, I don't know. A community garden in Kennedy Town felt like settling in a way I wasn't quite ready to commit to. Which in retrospect is an interesting thing to notice about my own thinking. The Sunday coffee group met again the following week. I went back. Jeffrey wasn't there. Margaret was, briefly, and left early for something else. There were 3 people I didn't recognize from the previous week. The conversation was pleasant, and I left after an hour with a sense of having done a reasonable thing that hadn't quite added up to enough. I think about that a lot now. The gap between doing the right thing and the right thing working. In the second week of January, I got a message on the Facebook group from a man who'd seen me post a question about local walking routes with flat terrain. I'd specified flat terrain, knee reasons, and he suggested a walk along the Xing Moon River channel in Sha Tin. Completely flat, family path. He was going on the Saturday. Did I want to join? His name was William, 67, from Hertfordshire originally, retired civil engineer, been in Hong Kong for 4 years. We walked for 2 hours along the river channel, which is not the most scenic walk in Hong Kong. Concrete banks, some litter, families with buggies. But William was good company in the specific way of someone who also lives alone and has learned not to waste a conversation. We talked about infrastructure mostly. He had views on the MTR's ventilation engineering that I found genuinely interesting. We had lunch at a cooked food center near the Sha Tin Town Square. Beef brisket noodles. 52 Hong Kong dollars each, about €6. Good. At the end of lunch, he said we should do it again. I said yes. And I meant it, and so did he, and we actually did. We met the following Saturday in Kowloon Park and walked for 90 minutes. And here's the thing I've thought about since. That Saturday with William was the best day I'd had in Hong Kong. It was genuinely good. Proper conversation, no effort required, with just two men with time on their hands and compatible amounts of interest in how things are built. I walked home afterward, feeling like the experiment might work after all. Then the following week, William emailed, he used email, which I respected, to say he was going back to the UK for a month. His daughter was having a baby. He'd be in touch when he returned. And he did come back eventually. But that was February. And February is when other things happen. The point is that William showed me what the city could have been. If I'd arrived with more time, more patience, more willingness to let connections form at the speed they form here, rather than the speed I needed them to form. If I'd been 30 years younger and building a career that gave the days their structure. If I'd been the sort of person who joins community gardens without feeling like he's committing to something he hasn't decided yet. He showed me it was possible, just not, for me, not at this stage, not in the time I had left to give it. I had another McDonald's morning in late January. Different day, same bench, same coffee going cold. While I read nothing and thought about whether I was managing or just enduring. The city outside was going about its business with absolute indifference, which I'd come to appreciate in an abstract way and resent in a concrete one. I opened my laptop that afternoon and looked at the spreadsheet. Then I opened a new tab and added a column I'd been resisting for weeks. I labeled it something clinical, daily satisfaction score or something similar. I can't remember the exact wording. And I started filling it in backwards through January, scoring each day out of 10 as honestly as I could manage. Most days were 5s, a few 6s on the days I'd walked somewhere new or had a proper conversation. The Saturday with William was an 8. The pub quiz night had been a 7. The daily average for January was 5.1. I looked at that number for quite a while. 5.1 out of 10. In a city I was spending €550 a month above my pension to live in. I'm not a man who usually puts numbers on things like that, but I'd run out of other tools. It was a Tuesday morning in early February. I know it was Tuesday because I'd had nothing on Monday and nothing planned for Tuesday either, and the 2 days had started to feel like a single continuous thing with a gap for sleeping in the middle. I went to the McDonald's on Sai Yung Choi Street in Mong Kok, not the one nearest the flat. I'd walk to this one sometimes specifically because it was further away, and the walk was 15 minutes, which was a purpose of sorts. I got a coffee, medium. I sat down at a table near the window that looked out onto the street where the phone accessory stalls were already busy, and the MTR entrance was swallowing and releasing people in a steady, indifferent stream. And I sat there. I didn't open my book, which was on the table in front of me. I didn't look at my phone. I just sat with the coffee and watched the street and the people in the city operating, as it always operated, with complete and total competence. 40 minutes went by. I know it was 40 minutes because I checked my watch when I arrived and checked it again when the thought arrived. Not because I was timing myself, but because, I don't know, force of habit. I've always tracked time at work. When there's no work, the habit stays. The thought wasn't dramatic. It didn't arrive with any particular feeling attached to it. It was more like a system completing a process and returning a result. Clean, flat, accurate. The thought was, this isn't retirement. This is just somewhere else to be invisible. I sat with that for a moment. Then I thought, I was invisible in Dooradoyle. I rattled around that house for 3 years being invisible. I came 10,000 kilometers, and I'm sitting in a McDonald's in Mong Kok being invisible. Except here the trains run on time, and the coffee costs slightly less. In the city outside the window continued not to need me. It was brilliant at that. Consistent, reliable. Not a flaw in its performance. I finished the coffee and walked back to the flat. I opened the laptop. Not the satisfaction column this time. I'd seen enough of that. I opened the main spreadsheet and I looked at everything together for the first time since November. The full picture. Total drawn down from savings since October. €3,400, give or take. 4 months and a bit. The savings now stood at approximately 61,600. The gap remained at around €550 a month at current adjusted spending. The runway, recalculated, was now 90 months. Still the same destination. Still 70 years old and broke in a city that would have no particular interest in that fact. And then I added a new column. Last one. I labeled it simply, Quality of Life. And I went back through every week since October. Not every day, I couldn't remember every day, which was itself a kind of answer. And I gave each week a score out of 10 as honestly as I could. The first 3 weeks had been 8s and 9s, the excitement of the new place, the Chungking Mansion's chaos, the satisfaction of finding the flat. Then it came down, gradually, not dramatically, 5, 6, 5, 5, 4. The Saturday with William had been an 8. The 2 Sunday coffee meetups averaged a 6. The rest of January had been 5s and 4s. I didn't calculate an average this time. I just looked at the shape of it, the direction of travel. A week passed. I didn't make the decision on a Tuesday. I made it on a Friday. After testing the conclusion the way I'd been trained to test conclusions, which is to say by trying to break it before you act on it. One went to 2 more events that week. A Tuesday evening talk at the Foreign Correspondents Club that I'd seen advertised, about urban planning in Asia, which seemed like it might be interesting, and it was, genuinely, quite good. I spoke to a man named Peter from New Zealand during the drinks afterward, a retired architect, 65, and we had a real conversation for about 20 minutes about the density housing challenges in Hong Kong versus Singapore. I thought, this is what I was hoping for. Then we said goodnight, and he went his way, and I went mine, and I didn't have his contact details, and I was fairly sure that was the last I'd see of him. Thursday, I went to a park in Sham Shui Po, swung in not with a plan, just because the flat was small, and the day was clear, and I needed to be somewhere that wasn't the flat or the McDonald's. And an older man was sitting on the bench next to mine, probably mid-70s, local, in a flat cap and a zip-up jacket. And he looked at me for a moment and said something in Cantonese, and then, apparently realizing I didn't understand, switched to a few words of English. He said I looked like a man with nowhere to be. I said that was fairly accurate. He laughed. He told me 3 words in Cantonese. I can't reproduce them accurately here. My pronunciation was apparently quite something, and he laughed harder each time I tried. We sat there for about half an hour, and I can't tell you what we talked about because there wasn't much shared language, but he pointed at things, a pigeon, a child on a bicycle, the sky, and made observations I couldn't understand, and seemed unbothered that I couldn't understand them. And I found this unexpectedly fine. I walked home afterward and I thought, that was good. That was a 7 maybe. And I thought, the problem is that was luck, not system. I can't build a retirement on occasional luck in parks. I opened the laptop that Friday evening. I went to the airline site. I looked at return flights to Dublin, which is the nearest airport to Limerick that makes sense, and I found one departing on the 2nd of February, 4 days away, for approximately €900. I looked at it for a few minutes, then I booked it. I emailed Mrs. Lamb the same evening. I referenced the rolling contract clause, 1 month's notice, which I'd read fully when I signed it, which meant I owed 1 more month's rent regardless, and told her I'd be vacating on the 2nd. She replied the following morning, very short, acknowledged fine. No questions, efficient, as she'd always been. I started packing. It didn't take long. 1 suitcase, 1 laptop bag, same as I'd arrived with. The hopeful shelf above the desk held 3 books I'd bought at a second-hand shop on Tung Choi Street. I left them there. Whoever came next might find them useful. I didn't feel much about leaving. I want to be honest about that because it might seem odd. A man moves to a city for 4.5 months and then leaves and feels not much. But I think the not much was information, actually. If I'd been tearing myself away from something I'd built, there'd have been something to tear. There wasn't anything to tear. The flat was 280 white square feet that had contained me efficiently and without complaint. The city was a city. Neither of them needed me to feel anything particular about leaving. I put the suitcase by the door. I made a cup of tea from the last of the berries. I stood at the window and looked at the air shaft, which was the usual gray, and at the windowsill across the way where the small green plant in the red pot was still there, exactly as it had always been. Someone was tending it. Someone cared about it. That was their life and their city. Mine was somewhere else, and I didn't fully know where yet, but I was fairly sure it wasn't here. I left on a gray February morning. The city looked exactly as it had when I arrived, which is the point, I suppose. Hong Kong doesn't adjust itself around your presence or your absence. It just continues. I stopped at the Cooked Food Center on Kowloon Street on the way to the MTR. One last bowl of wonton noodle soup, 32 Hong Kong dollars. My stomach accepted it without complaint, which I noted with the mild irritation of a man who spent 3 months negotiating with his own digestive system and got no credit for it. The Airport Express took 23 minutes and 52 seconds, 2 seconds slower than when I'd arrived. I didn't time it deliberately. Old habit, right? So, the damage. I want to be precise about this because I think precision is what's useful here. And there are enough vague stories on the internet about how someone went abroad and lost money without ever telling you exactly how much or exactly how. Total drawn from savings over 4.5 months, approximately €3,400. That's the gap between my pension and actual monthly costs accumulated. When on top of that, €900 for the return flight, and the guest house at the start, 2 weeks in Chungking Mansions at €55 a night, so about €770. Call it €4,500 in total. Roughly 5% of my savings. Gone. Not catastrophic, not the horror story. I've watched plenty of those on YouTube, men who lost everything, tens of thousands, to situations a good deal more dramatic than mine. I'm not trying to make my story sound worse than it was, but it wasn't nothing. That was money I'd saved in the cautious, incremental way of a man who never earned a large salary and knew he never would. Every euro of it came from showing up and fixing things for 31 years. You don't feel casual about that money, or I don't. I was back in Dooradoyle by mid-February, and the house was exactly as I'd left it. Phil next door had kept an eye on it. The kettle still worked. Everything was in its place, which was both the comfort and the problem. I sat in the kitchen that first evening and I thought, right, Brendan, so what have we learned? And I made a list, not on paper, on the laptop, in a document, because that's how I think. First error, I used a single forum post as a primary source and weighted it as if it were verified technical documentation. It wasn't. It was someone's experience, possibly accurate for that specific person in a specific period with specific habits that were not my habits. One commenter told me it depended on lifestyle and health situation. One commenter, I should have made that comment my starting point, not a footnote I ignored. Second error, I didn't account for health insurance. I'm 63. I have a dodgy knee. In a city where a GP visit costs around €180, going uninsured was not an option I was willing to take. That's 2,100 Hong Kong dollars a month, over €240, that didn't appear anywhere in the budget I built. Not because I was careless. I thought I'd accounted for it. I hadn't. I'd put in a placeholder number based on nothing. Third error, and this one's harder to admit. I didn't ask myself what the life required, only what the budget required. Those are different questions. I can tell you exactly what a retirement in Hong Kong costs in rent, food, transport, insurance. What I didn't calculate was what it costs in connection, in purpose, in the feeling of being somewhere you're needed, or at least somewhere that occasionally notices you. Those things don't have a line item. They should. If you're watching this and you're planning something similar, not necessarily Hong Kong, anywhere, here's the actual question to ask. What does the life need? Not just the budget. Work it out honestly, not optimistically, and then run that version of the numbers, not the forum posters version. I did 2 things when I got back. The first, I posted an ad for the spare room. A postgrad from the University of Limerick replied within a day. Studying engineering, quiet, looking for somewhere affordable. His name is Dara. He moved in 3 weeks later, €600 a month. He eats dinner in the kitchen on Tuesdays and Thursdays and occasionally asks me about the Wi-Fi, which I sort out immediately because I am still good at that. And the arithmetic of my retirement changed materially. The house is less quiet. The second thing, I booked flights to Melbourne. March. First time. Ciaran met me at the airport with his kids, which turned out to be two boys, 7 and 4, names Finn and Cormac, who I have now met properly and whose favorite colors I can tell you. Green and blue, respectively. I stayed 3 weeks. It was good. It was complicated in the way that families are complicated when you've been apart too long and everyone's a bit cautious with each other. But it was good. Ciaran and I walked along the Yarra one afternoon, and I told him about Hong Kong, the whole thing, the spreadsheet and the McDonald's mornings, and the man in the park who laughed at my Cantonese. He listened properly. He said it sounded like a reasonable thing to have tried. I said it was. And then he said, "You should have come here first, Da." And I said, yes, probably I should have. Hong Kong is a magnificent city. I want to say that clearly and mean it. Efficient, safe, extraordinary to walk in, with food that is genuinely good if your stomach cooperates with you. The MTR is everything it was advertised to be. The city does what it says on the tin. None of that was the problem. The problem was that I went looking for a system that worked, and I forgot to check whether I was a component of it, whether there was a role for me, whether anything in that city needed what I had to offer, which is not much. Fixing things mostly and paying attention and showing up when people need the shared drive restored. I was good at fixing systems. I just forgot to include myself in the diagnostic, and that's where we leave Brendan. Ada back in Limerick, spare room occupied, Melbourne flights used, the savings at 60,000 and change, intact enough, the lesson costing him €4,500 and 4.5 months of his life, which sounds like a lot until you consider what it might have cost if he'd kept going. There's no villain in this story, no one to blame, no one who deceived him, no dramatic moment of betrayal. That's actually what makes it one of the harder stories to sit with. There's nothing to be angry at. Just a man, a forum post, and a gap between what a life costs on paper and what it costs to actually live it. If you're planning to move abroad, to Thailand, to Hong Kong, to anywhere, the numbers you need to run are not the ones on the forum. The forum numbers are someone else's numbers, from someone else's body, with someone else's stomach, and someone else's knee, and someone else's need for occasional human contact. Run yours. And before you open the spreadsheet at all, ask yourself one question first. What does the life I'm building actually need to function? Not just the rent and food, the connection, the purpose, the feeling of being somewhere you're not surplus. Those things don't have a line item, but they're the ones that will break you when they're missing. Thanks for watching. This is Thailand.